only 1 million back then. Now it's much more, I believe.
Yes.
But yeah, that was one of the, you're looking for all possible solutions. And then I was like, I've heard of offshore banking, so let me just go and reach out to Swiss private banks. And indeed, the barrier there was the minimum deposit to access safe banking, which was so frustrating, right? Because what you get is, you're telling me there is a real solution that actually could have helped my family, right, protect their savings. I mean, during my journey, I've seen family members twice lose their life savings. Initially, when the banking sector collapsed in Syria, and later on in Lebanon, because it was a neighboring country. I had family members put money there in 2019. They lost everything again. So it's so frustrating to know that there is a real solution that is legal, that is available, but you can't access it because you don't have enough capital.
Welcome to Finscale, the show that takes you to the heart of finance transformation. Every week, Solenne Niedercorn and her guests explore new initiatives shaping the future of the industry. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Finscale again. I have the honor today to have Amer Baroudi, the co-founder and CEO of Nsave, as guest on the Finscale podcast. Hi, Amer. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you, Solenne?
Yeah, and I'm fine. I must apologize again for my voice because I've been quite sick for 8 days. So you hear my duck voice. It's not very convenient, but that's the way it is. Sorry for that.
No worries at all. I'm glad you're feeling better.
Yeah, I'm happy that we can record this episode that has been several times postponed. So now we're here and we start recording. Amer, I was thrilled to have you on the podcast because I believe you have a very interesting, brave, courageous mission to provide access in a safe and secure way to financial services for everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone, because we all know that many people don't have access to financial services in many, many parts in our world, but also in our countries. So you will explain to us what is your mission into more details. But prior to that, I would like that you go back a little bit. Could you take 1 or 2 minutes to explain to the audience where you come from and why coming from Syria was such a complexity for you when you start your journey in the UK?
Sounds good. And thank you so much again for having me. I was born and raised in Damascus. I grew up in Syria. Mm-hmm. I grew up there. Then the revolution happened and later on the war. So I lived through 1 year of that. And then I had to leave the country. I was just getting into university actually back then. And that kicked off a very long journey of moving countries. Initially not by choice, later on by choice, thankfully, but started by literally survival mode, trying to, work, make money, go back to school, take care of family and all of that, experience that millions of people, unfortunately, had to go through, whether they're Syrians or from similar countries that go through different levels of distress. That journey was faced by a massive struggle, which is accessing safe banking. Mm-hmm. Accessing just a simple, basic bank account was one of the biggest challenges that I faced. In fact, for almost 10 years, I was unable to open a bank account. And the reason for that is, certain countries, they get flagged as high risk. Mm-hmm. Certain nationalities get flagged as high risk. So financial institutions would, automatically say, no, thank you, outside of risk appetite, as a blanket policy, as a blanket approach. And because you're also on the move, you haven't, settled enough in a place, it makes it even more difficult for you to be able to access that. So I lived through that in multiple countries. And later on, when I got incredibly lucky to move to Oxford and study, was a different, stage in life. It was no longer survival. It was, I've discovered entrepreneurship. I've been in the space for a while and had couple of successful shots at it, which was really wonderful. I was really thinking of the biggest problem that I personally can relate to that has a global scale, mm-hmm. To really dedicate myself and my time to go and tackle and accessing safe banking for people who come from places where inflation is high, local banking is unstable, is a problem that is faced by hundreds of millions of people. And I wanted to go and tackle that issue. And that was kind of how I started thinking about the solutions that are available, and then how can someone actually understand regulation and compliance and go tackle it in a legal and compliant manner.
Yeah. When we prepared these episodes, you told me that you also managed to discuss with Swiss banks trying to open a bank account in private banks. That was no problem. But
Indeed.
The minimum was 1 million Swiss francs, correct?
Only 1 million back then. Now it's much more, I believe.
Yes.
But yeah, that was one of the, you're looking for all possible solutions. And then I was like, I've heard of offshore banking, so let me just go and reach out to Swiss private banks. And indeed, the barrier there was the minimum deposit to access safe banking, which was so frustrating, right? Because what you get is, you're telling me there is a real solution that actually could have helped my family, right, protect their savings. I mean, during my journey, I've seen family members twice lose their life savings. Initially, when the banking sector collapsed in Syria, and later on in Lebanon, because there was a neighboring country. I had family members put money there in 2019. They lost everything again. So it's so frustrating to know that there is a real solution that is legal, that is available, but you can't access it because you don't have enough capital. So that was also one thing, just, that lived with me later on. And then I started thinking about offshore banking later on.
Yeah. I've been working for years in banking, and I've implemented such solution of digital onboarding. And maybe that would help that we dive a little bit deeper into that subject, because I remember when we implemented this KYC solution that was a white label solution for a bank, we had to go through all those lists from the FATF, from local regulators, from the banks themselves, having in mind their own risk metrics. So indeed, there are some red flags and countries that we absolutely need to, get rid of and to remove from the books of the banks. What can you explain from your perspective? What you think is the misinterpretation of banks and financial institutions, broadly speaking, when it comes to the flag of a country?
Yeah, that is a complex issue. I'm sure we would need a very long podcast together to unpack all the details and nuances there. But what we've seen, unfortunately, and this is actually a serious systemic problem. What we've seen is there are multiple layers to it, but we've seen that sometimes, or most of the time, there is this blanket policy of, if this country is listed on a certain list, then it's going to be rendered, outside of risk appetite, and whoever is coming from that country shouldn't be admitted. Now, that blanket approach is in many ways lazy compliance, because a country could be listed for many, many reasons. In fact, I'm a big believer in the notion of, it's not necessarily always higher risk, it's different risks. So our approach with Nsave has been, instead of just using that blanket approach and relying on very simplistic, listing and make a decisive factor whether someone should be onboarded or not, we want to look at the real risks and then assess them and put controls that are suitable for risk that could inherently be part of a certain jurisdiction. So for us, we think it's honestly morally problematic at onboarding to say, if you come from a certain country, you shouldn't access, basic financial services. That is wrong. We think it's poor compliance. No, we said we want to be more nuanced, assess the risks that are related to that jurisdiction, and then after our better assessment, decide to onboard an individual and put controls over the full cycle of the user experience, which is actually proper compliance, right? Because compliance shouldn't start and end on onboarding. It's quite an ongoing process over the life cycle and over the journey of the user. So that's our different approach to, understanding risk, being more thoughtful, actually understanding also what regulations is supposed to, why we have regulations, right? Regulations is partially to protect the system. It's to make sure that, we have robust AML rules and CTF rules, but also regulations are here to enable financial institutions to offer services fairly and justly unjustly as well, and not to exclude a certain segment because of their identity. So we kind of take that holistic approach rather than, a blanket, simplistic country assessment on onboarding.
When we prepared the episodes, you mentioned the notion of compliance by design. And how do you think this approach could really transform the way financial institutions treat high-risk clients? And how could we do to help compliance teams consider another way to treat those clients?
Yeah, indeed. For what we notice, unfortunately, that a lot of fintechs, they think of compliance as an afterthought. They would want to, run quickly, launch a product, and then they would think of and deal with the ramifications of compliance. For us, we didn't want to take that approach. We wanted to think of compliance as, inherent step of being able to launch our product. And we did that internally by investing a lot in our own proprietary tools. So at Nsave, if you ask me, we're a tech company at heart, right? So we decided to actually build that compliance stack and own it, build our engines internally and have controls and be able to refine it and improve it as we progress. And for the use case and the problem that we're solving, it's so important. I would say even not only for Nsave, but for financial industry, right? For regulated industries, compliance is a very big part of what we do. So thinking of compliance as an enabler, not necessarily just as, a block to be able to do business, is the philosophy that we wanted to adopt and take. And I do think that's the right approach to offer financial services safely and securely. And it's really embedding that within the product when you're thinking about it. So we do that, for example, when we introduce the trust limits into the Nsave account, right? So when you open an Nsave account, there are certain limits that you can access or not, and you can increase them, you can reduce them, depend on your risk assessment and certain documentation that we might ask from someone to be able to access additional services or higher thresholds of the services. So that's how we think of compliance by design as really part of product.
So how did you start building Nsave? I've been covering this in a French-speaking episode, and I find it very interesting because in your case, you have built a lot of things internally. But what was the starting point in terms of tech development?
Yeah, where should we start? We have, we built the back end and the systems to manage the accounts. I think the substantial chunk of build we decided to take on was actually the compliance stack. So that's, the way we do risk assessment, our onboarding journeys, the controls on the product that we have, and the transaction monitoring tool as well. That is proprietary. So we also built that internally. We also link that system that we have that our operators use to the mobile app itself that our users would interact with. And that was really important for us because we also wanted to make sure that we can automate a lot of the processes. So for example, when a user is going through onboarding, we might want to ask them additional questions about certain transactions, or even before they onboarded, we might want to ask clarifying questions. So a lot of that back and forth is automated between our internal systems and the mobile app. In a large part, actually, we're testing even with few AI pieces here and there in a very, very, tiny, thoughtful way to intervene there. But we wanted to have that full experience. So we spent a significant time building our tech until we launched. We started working on Nsave towards the end of 2022 is actually when we started. And we only launched March last year. So it took us quite some time to actually build the infrastructure.
So you two elements that you mentioned. So the bank account, you have to rely on regulated financial institutions. So who did you contract with to support you with the real bank accounts? And then I have another question on the monitoring tool.
Sounds good. I mean, in financial services, you can't operate in vacuum. You're part of the system, right? So you need to work with partners and you need to convince them. It was not a straightforward process. Initially, we wanted to find institutions that actually believe in the impact and we have alignment with values in terms of what we want to do. Once we started, identifying these partners, we also wanted them to see the potential, right? Because not only we're doing real impact, but this is also a very serious business opportunity as well. We're talking about 700 million people globally who don't have access to safe and stable banking, that we want to, offer them financial services. We're talking about people actually that work really hard. They make savings, but their value of their savings evaporates because of hyperinflation or because their economies collapse overnight. So there's a real significant business opportunity. So once we aligned on that one, it boiled down to the compliance questions, right? Like all financial institutions, they come and they DD you and they ask you, how do you do things? What was really exciting is very often we do demo our systems, and then the banking partners who interviewed us would ask us, can you license your technology? And that's just very exciting, to see that validation and to see also that we're actually doing something right. And who knows, maybe at some point we can look into doing that piece. Currently, we're focused on serving customers and consumers. But that process of walking them through, not only convincing them with the impact and the business opportunity, but taking them and walking them through, our policies, our systems, how we think about compliance, how we want to do it, that gave them the reassurances. And doing that over and over again, we convinced multiple regulated financial institutions to actually work with us and offer the product to our customers.
So I have a question on the monitoring tool. I've been covering this in different parts of my podcast, but one I have in mind was sanction screening, and because in those checks, when you do those checks on an ongoing basis, you may have the case where you have a lot of false negative, false positive. How do you manage the production of too many false positive and still manage to properly serve your clients? So avoiding reports to the local FIU, but on the other side, serving your clients in a very smooth manner. So how do you balance these two elements?
Yeah, frankly, tech is really improving on that front. Really improving. So we've seen a lot of advancement on that front. What we do is we rely on the best possible systems there, particularly on sanction screening. Sometimes also what resolves that issue is automatically asking for additional pieces of information. So if you don't rely only on the name, right, you can rely on additional, usually, the birth date clears it most of the time. So just factoring that in mind in certain cases make it much, much smoother. And the other piece is the burden on us is, the part of owning the whole stack of compliance helps so much, because you really reduce the friction points or the points where you require a lot of manual intervention, right? And that piece that I mentioned also to you, about having AI assist clearing or supporting the staff who are reviewing the cases has been really, really transformative for us to be able to handle that piece in particular.
And when it comes to the ID checks, again, I'm very well concerned by this because I've been digging into it for months. It's not the same to check an ID from a European passport where it's quite standardized compared to a local ID card of a country that is more exotic, if I may say. So if you want to serve the entire population in a safe manner and secure manner, you need to cover that perfectly. So did you also develop your own tools? Because it's a very specific building block that you need to build, or did you rely on an external solution?
So far that what we've done is we wanted to follow the JMSLG guidance on, digital onboarding and also the regulations in the areas where we need to follow the regulations. And the regulation is very clear there, the advice there and the standard. It's about, having a machine readable area on the ID, right? That's what you really need to look for. So far, we haven't faced serious blockers or issues on having the IDs. Most of our customers are either able to provide a passport, which is, there is a massive databases as well now on Prado and whatever for the assessment. And the second piece is the national ID, where also in most cases, we've seen that there is a machine readable zone and we've relied on that. I think we are now at a stage where we're accepting these documents and it's working very well. I think over time, we need to look and probably just work with the regulator hand in hand to look into alternative documentations for more extreme cases where someone might not have an ID actually and still wants to onboard. It is something on our roadmap, I believe, to go into that territory and work with the regulators for those cases. But the use case that we're serving, it's actually a customer who is financially literate. They actually bank. They just have very terrible and not safe solutions around them. So we haven't faced any significant problems yet regarding the ID.
Okay, perfect. So if you take a look now at the client base that you have built, what does it look like?
We are serving so many people from so many places, which is wonderful. Our customers are coming from places, ranging from Egypt, Lebanon, Bangladesh, Argentina, and many, many other countries, and they have the same characteristics, right? They have high inflation. Local banking is very restrictive or expensive, or people don't trust it very much, whether they're back home, whether they've immigrated and they're in Europe and they're still facing that issue of accessing banking. So it's truly, truly a global product. And, the sky is the limit for us of who and where our customers can be.
And how did they hear about your solution?
I have to say, we've been so lucky in the sense of we still don't have a marketing budget. It has been wonderful to see just people recommending the product. So word of mouth has been really, really wonderful. So we see referrals just coming in from users who use the product.
Mm-hmm. Can you provide us some figures?
I'll have to, not yet.
Okay. So you were able to raise funds via venture capitalists, and I'm thinking of Sequoia Capital, for instance. How did it happen? And can you please describe this roadshow to raise funds and and how mature you would say the VCs are on those subjects?
Yeah, so we are very lucky with our investors. What happened is we launched March last year, the pilot, and then we started growing very, very quickly. And over, the few months, we had our existing investors who've been seeing and getting excited with us with the traction and the growth. So what happened is our existing investors, actually, they also invested us on the Series A. So TQ Ventures led the round. Sequoia Capital, they had led our seed round. They continued and doubled down in the Series A as well. We had Y Combinator as well, who also invested in our seed round. Also doubled down on the Series A. So it's been very wonderful. And I think for us, we're lucky in the sense of we didn't have to, go out there and ask for financing. What happened is investors who've seen the growth and have seen the momentum, and they've seen us work for years building the business, seen the traction, decided to double down and continue. So in that sense, we've been lucky. And so honestly, it has been wonderful to work with our investors. I'm very glad.
Excellent. I had a question in mind and I lost it. Yes. So there is one element that is quite striking when we talk with you, is Amer, is your passion. You really feel that passion. And it's it's not uncommon, but it's very strong for you. So how do you keep that passion in your team? How do you build that culture around these population who really like something that is quite, I would say, standard for all of us to keep, that customer-centric approach, which is, I would say, a bit more important in your mission than for many other fintech companies, because you really help them so much.
It is so important. And I have to say, I think building the culture at Nsave is one of the things that I'm most proud of. Mm-hmm. The part of interacting with customers, seeing customer support messages, talking to customers, sharing the stories. We receive so many messages on customer support and emails as well of people saying, thank you so much. Now, because of Nsave, I'm saving 40% of my salary, 50% of my salary. I can make sure that my dad's savings are protected now. These things really matter. And everyone on the team feels like they're actually doing something good. Not only we have very big ambitions to build a daring company on a global scale, but also we get to do something meaningful while we're pursuing a very ambitious plan and a very ambitious dream. And just echoing the messages, sharing the messages of our customers, sometimes forcing everyone on the team to do customer support as well helps a lot, right? Yeah. So you have that empathy. And finally, I think we spent, me and Abdullah, my co-founder, we spent quite a lot of time thinking about, what kind of company we want to build and how, our values should be a guiding principle for decision making for our customers. Early on, when we were doing market research and we were talking to customers, that empathy piece has been so important. And I can share an anecdote without sharing which country, but I was talking to this customer and they've had lost their hundreds of thousands of dollars in a certain bank because, inflation and the economy collapsed. And then they told me, what bothers me the most? It's not that I've lost the money. I understand, I understand what happened, but the way I've been treated.
Yes.
And the way financial institutions treat me, whether back home or whether when I'm outside trying to open an account, that what bothers me the most. So for us, it was, that human, piece of understanding the experience of the user. And then when we're building the whole experience, whether it's in the app, whether when we ask you questions and tell you why we ask you questions and ask them in a thoughtful way, or when we're interacting on customer support is so important for us. And we wanted to bake that into it. So that's, I think, the secret sauce of, maintaining that energy and maintaining that passion towards our customers.
That what you say is really striking, because I've met two persons close relationship, who told me that they have been fired by their banks in Luxembourg. And I was so amazed by the way they had been treated. Those people have salaries, they earn money. It was not a question of risk. It's just that the account was not sufficiently, the bank didn't earn anything on those bank accounts. So they decided to get rid of those two clients. And I was absolutely amazed to see the way they had been treated, like just receiving an email from the bank telling them, and two different banks, not the same bank, that they were, the bank decided to close their account, and without any question how we can support our clients to change and go in another bank. So I was shocked because, it also made me think of the way some banks at the end of banking secrecy in Europe decided to get rid of some clients, despite the fact that those clients had done their fiscal amnesty that they had done their job properly. So yeah, I believe that there is a cultural shift that you finger point that is so important, is having the capacity again to and understand what he or she is living right now. And this is why the culture at Nsave needs to remain like this and not shift in the opposite way as traditional banks do.
Absolutely.
So we hear that you have a lot of traction, a lot of interest, and that your clients love you so much. Great. But what are your plans for the coming years? Also in terms of expansion in Europe and probably in unbanked areas also.
Yeah. So after our launch, we started seeing a very interesting trend in how our customers are using the product, because the initial problem we were solving for is, can we help our customers keep their savings somewhere safe? They hedge it from inflation. It's safely stored somewhere safe. That's the first problem which we managed to solve. Then we started seeing an interesting trend of our customers. Now that they have their funds somewhere safe, they're opening investment accounts, and then they're wanting to invest their funds and they want to grow their money, right? Which was so good to see, because our mission at Nsave is to help the financially excluded protect and grow their wealth. And we started with protection as a step number one. So we said, okay, this is just a great validation that we're actually heading in the right direction. So we wanted to enable them access to additional financial products, particularly on the investment side of things. So we've worked very, very hard to start offering that to them. So you might have seen just a few weeks ago, we've launched also an investment or access to investment products. So now our customers, not only they can put their funds somewhere safe, but they can also, if they wish so, invest in US equities, buy stocks, buy ETFs, and be able to grow their wealth as well. So that's kind of the direction that we see ourselves focusing on and going after. So it's helping our customers have their funds somewhere safe, and then offering them largely simple access to financial products. And we look at, the type of customers who are largely now using Nsave, we see young professionals coming from these countries. They are actually, in many ways, they're earning from abroad. So they're receiving their salaries much quicker, much more efficient, paying less fees, which is really, really good to see. So we really want to, stay close to this customer, really serve them, understand how they're getting value from Nsave, and then just making sure that the product is a wonderful product that serves their needs. And then we grow to different markets and jurisdictions as we keep doing that.
Excellent. Perfect. So congrats for everything you've done and everything you're going to do. Amer, I just would like to conclude with a book recommendation, as I usually do it. Every time I have a guest, I ask for a recommendation. So what do you recommend to us today?
I would recommend Meditations, Marcus Aurelius. I think it's a wonderful book to read. Yeah.
Yes, I like it. But I have recently, I will send it to you, a very interesting podcast describing how he was really and how much he's been influenced by I would say the period, the history, and that he was not so strong. That we believe he was very strong when he was not such a strong guy. I will send it to you.
I would love to listen to that podcast.
Thank you so much, Amer. And I would like to say a big thank you to Ruth, who listens to us because she kindly made the intro. And I would like to thank her for that. Thank you.
Ruth
Bye-bye.
is wonderful. Thank you, Solenne.
Thank you for listening to Finscale. Don't hesitate to subscribe to the newsletter on Substack to stay up to date with the latest innovations. You can also find the podcast in audio format on all listening platforms and in video format on YouTube. See you soon with Solenne Niedercorn.